Right now, as you're listening to this, your brain is making thousands of micro decisions. But here's what most people don't realize. There's a split second between what happens to you and how you respond to it. In that split second lies the difference between those who control their lives and those who are controlled by their circumstances. This isn't about motivation or willpower. This is about rewiring your brain at a neurological level to become someone who responds with wisdom instead of reacting with emotion. By the end of this training, you'll have the exact system that high performers use to stay calm under pressure, make better decisions, and maintain control in any situation. Chapter 1. The split second that changes everything. Let me paint you a picture. Two people receive the exact same devastating email from their boss. Person A immediately fires back. An angry response, storms out of the office, and damages their career permanently. Person B takes a deep breath, pauses for 5 seconds, and responds professionally while planning their next strategic move. Same situation, completely different outcomes. The only difference was what happened in that split second between stimulus and response. Most people think they have no control over their reactions. They believe that when someone cuts them off in traffic, insults them, or challenges them, their emotional response is automatic and unavoidable. This is the greatest lie our minds tell us. The truth is, between every stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies your power to choose your response. And in that choice lies your freedom and your future. Here's what's actually happening in your brain during that split second. When you encounter a trigger, whether it's criticism, stress, or conflict, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, immediately floods your body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This happens in about 150 milliseconds. Your heart rate spikes, your muscles tense, and your body prepares for fight, flight, or freeze. This is your reactive brain taking control. But here's the game changer. You have another part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex. This is your strategic brain, your rational brain, your response brain. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for impulse control, decision-making, and emotional regulation. The problem is, it takes about 500 milliseconds to fully activate. That means you have a 350 millisecond window where your reactive brain is in complete control unless you've trained yourself to bridge that gap. The people who seem naturally calm and composed haven't been blessed with better genetics or circumstances. They've simply trained their brains to activate the prefrontal cortex faster and more consistently. They've learned to recognize the early warning signs of reactivity and interrupt the pattern before it takes control. This isn't just a nice-to-have skill. This is the foundation of every other success skill you'll ever develop. Think about the most successful people you know. The leaders who stay calm in crisis. The negotiators who never lose their cool. The parents who respond to their children with patience instead of frustration. They all share this one fundamental ability. They've mastered the space between stimulus and response. They've trained their minds to pause, assess, and choose their response, rather than being hijacked by their emotions. This training isn't about suppressing your emotions or becoming a robot. It's about becoming the conscious architect of your responses instead of the unconscious victim of your reactions. When you master this skill, you'll notice that problems that used to trigger you barely register as inconveniences. Conflicts that used to escalate become opportunities for connection. Stressful situations that used to overwhelm you become challenges you can navigate with clarity and purpose. The research is clear. People who can regulate their emotional responses earn more money, have better relationships, enjoy better health, and experience significantly less stress and anxiety. They're not smarter or more talented. They're simply more skilled at managing the most important 6 inches on the planet, the space between their ears. Chapter 2. The Hidden Cost of Reactive Living. Before we dive into the solution, you need to understand exactly what reactive living is costing you. Because until you feel the full weight of the problem, you won't commit to the work required for the solution. Reactive living isn't just about having bad days or losing your temper occasionally. It's a systematic destruction of your potential that happens so gradually you might not even notice it. Let's start with your relationships. Every time you react instead of respond, you're making a deposit into the wrong account. When your partner says something that triggers you and you snap back defensively, you're not just having a moment. You're teaching them that you're emotionally unpredictable. When you react with impatience to your children's questions, you're not just showing frustration, you're programming them to see you as unsafe to approach with their real problems. Here's what happens neurologically when you react. Your amygdala hijacks your entire nervous system and floods it with stress chemicals. In that state, your IQ literally drops by an average of 25 points. You become less creative, less empathetic, and significantly less intelligent. You say things you don't mean, make decisions you regret, and damage relationships that took years to build. And here's the kicker. The other person's brain mirrors your emotional state through something called emotional contagion. Your reactivity literally makes them more reactive too, creating a spiral of escalating negative emotions. In your professional life, reactive behavior is even more devastating because the consequences are more visible and longer lasting. That email you sent in anger becomes permanent evidence of your lack of emotional control. That meeting where you got defensive instead of listening becomes the story people tell about your leadership ability. That moment when you interrupted your colleague because you felt threatened becomes the reason they stop bringing you opportunities. The most successful professionals have learned that every interaction is being unconsciously evaluated on 2 levels: competence and emotional safety. People might respect your technical skills, but they'll only trust you with real responsibility if they believe you can stay calm under pressure. They need to know that when things get difficult, you'll be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But the deepest cost of reactive living is what it does to your relationship with yourself. Every time you react instead of respond, you're reinforcing a neural pathway that says, "I am not in control of my own mind." You're strengthening the identity of someone who is at the mercy of their emotions, their circumstances, and other people's behavior. Over time, this creates a learned helplessness, where you start to believe that your emotional reactions are just who you are, rather than patterns you can change. This learned helplessness then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You stop trying to improve your responses because you've convinced yourself it's impossible. You accept mediocrity in your relationships because you believe conflict is inevitable. You settle for less in your career because you don't trust yourself to handle challenging situations professionally. You live a smaller life not because you lack potential, but because you've never learned to access the potential that exists in that space between stimulus and response. The physiological cost is just as real. Chronic reactivity keeps your nervous system in a constant state of hypervigilance. Your cortisol levels remain elevated, which suppresses your immune system, disrupts your sleep, and accelerates aging. Your digestive system struggles because your body is constantly preparing for threats that aren't actually life-threatening. Your cardiovascular system works overtime, increasing your risk of heart disease and stroke. Reactive living doesn't just damage your relationships and career, it literally shortens your lifespan. Perhaps, most tragically, reactive living robs you of your ability to learn and grow from difficult experiences. When you're in a reactive state, your brain is focused solely on survival, not learning. You miss the valuable feedback that challenging situations provide. You fail to see the patterns in your triggers. You don't develop the emotional intelligence that comes from conscious reflection on your responses. Instead of becoming wiser and more skilled through your experiences, you simply accumulate emotional scar tissue. The opportunity cost is enormous. Every moment you spend in reactivity is a moment you're not spending in creativity, problem-solving, or genuine connection. Every relationship damaged by poor emotional regulation is a network of opportunities lost. Every professional situation mishandled due to reactivity is a chance for advancement that disappears. The life you could be living, the relationships you could be enjoying, the career you could be building, the peace you could be experiencing, all of it remains just outside your reach as long as you remain a prisoner to your reactive patterns. Chapter 3. The Neuroscience of Response versus Reaction. Now that you understand what reactive living costs you, let's dive deep into what's actually happening in your brain and how you can rewire it for response instead of reaction. This isn't just theory. This is the neurobiological foundation that will give you complete confidence in your ability to change these patterns permanently. Your brain has essentially two operating systems. The first is your limbic system, which includes the amygdala and operates at lightning speed to keep you alive. This system evolved over millions of years, when immediate physical threats were a daily reality. If a predator appeared, you needed to react instantly. Think later. Survive now. The amygdala can process a threat and trigger a full stress response in just 150 milliseconds. That's faster than you can consciously process what's happening. The second operating system is your prefrontal cortex, which is essentially your CEO brain. This is where executive function, emotional regulation, strategic thinking, and impulse control live. The prefrontal cortex can override the amygdala's reaction, but it needs about 500 milliseconds to fully come online. This creates what neuroscientists call the amygdala hijack window, 350 milliseconds, where your reactive brain is in complete control unless you've specifically trained to bridge this gap. Here's the breakthrough understanding that changes everything. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat. When someone criticizes your work, interrupts you in a meeting, or cancels plans at the last minute, your amygdala responds exactly as if you were being chased by a predator. Your heart rate spikes, stress hormones flood your system, and your higher brain functions shut down. You're literally experiencing a survival response to a situation that requires strategic thinking. But here's where it gets interesting. Through a process called neuroplasticity, you can actually rewire your brain to activate the prefrontal cortex faster and more consistently. Every time you successfully pause and choose your response, instead of reacting automatically, you're strengthening neural pathways that make this choice easier next time. You're literally building new highways in your brain that lead to emotional regulation instead of emotional explosion. The key mechanism is something called cognitive control networks. These are neural circuits that connect your prefrontal cortex to your limbic system, allowing your rational brain to communicate with and regulate your emotional brain. The stronger these networks become, the more easily you can maintain emotional equilibrium under pressure. And these networks get stronger every single time you practice pausing, breathing, and choosing your response consciously. Research from Harvard Medical School shows that people who practice emotional regulation techniques for just 8 weeks show measurable changes in brain structure. The prefrontal cortex literally grows thicker and more connected. The amygdala becomes less reactive and more regulated. These aren't just functional changes. These are actual physical transformations in your brain that make emotional control your new default rather than something you have to force. The fascinating part is that this works through what's called top-down regulation. Instead of trying to suppress or control your emotions directly, you're training your prefrontal cortex to send calming signals down to your limbic system. It's like having an excellent manager who can calm down an overwhelmed employee, not by dismissing their concerns, but by providing perspective, resources, and a clear plan of action. Another crucial piece of the neuroscience is understanding mirror neurons. These are brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that action. This is why emotional states are contagious. Your calm, regulated state actually helps regulate the nervous systems of people around you. When you respond instead of react, you're not just helping yourself. You're creating a field of emotional safety that benefits everyone in your environment. The neurotransmitter systems involved are equally important. Chronic reactivity depletes your serotonin and dopamine while flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. This creates a neurochemical state that makes reactivity more likely and response more difficult. But when you practice emotional regulation, you increase production of GABA, which calms the nervous system, and strengthen your ability to produce serotonin and dopamine naturally. You're literally changing your brain chemistry to support emotional stability. Perhaps most importantly, you need to understand that your brain's primary job is pattern recognition and prediction. Every time you react to a trigger, you're teaching your brain that this is the appropriate response to this type of situation. You're strengthening a neural pattern that says, when this happens, we do this. But every time you pause and respond differently, you're creating a new pattern. You're teaching your brain that you have choices, that you can handle challenging situations with grace, and that you are in control of your own mental and emotional state. The beautiful thing about neuroplasticity is that your brain remains changeable throughout your entire life. It doesn't matter how long you've been reactive, how ingrained your patterns seem, or how many times you've tried and failed to change. Every moment offers a new opportunity to choose response over reaction. And every choice strengthens the neural networks that make future choices easier. Chapter 4. The Awareness Foundation. Before you can respond instead of react, you must develop what I call emotional awareness. The ability to recognize your emotional state and triggers before they hijack your nervous system. This isn't about analyzing your feelings or diving deep into psychology. This is about developing real-time awareness of your internal state, so you can intervene before your amygdala takes control. Most people live with almost zero emotional awareness. They go from calm to angry, from peaceful to anxious, from confident to insecure, without any conscious recognition of the transition. It's like driving a car without a dashboard. You don't know you're running out of gas until the engine stops working. By the time they realize they're upset, they're already in full reaction mode, saying and doing things they'll regret later. Developing emotional awareness starts with understanding your personal trigger patterns. Every person has a unique emotional fingerprint. Specific situations, words, or behaviors that consistently activate their stress response. For some people, it's feeling ignored or dismissed. For others, it's being interrupted or challenged. Some people get triggered by feeling rushed or pressured, while others react to perceived unfairness or disrespect. Your triggers aren't random. They're usually connected to your core values, past experiences, or unconscious fears. When someone or something threatens what you value most, whether that's respect, security, competence, or connection, your brain interprets this as a survival threat and activates your defensive systems. The key is to identify these patterns before they're activated, not after you've already reacted. Here's a powerful technique for developing trigger awareness. For the next week, every time you notice yourself feeling frustrated, defensive, angry, or overwhelmed, immediately ask yourself 3 questions. What exactly just happened? What story am I telling myself about what happened? And what deeper value or need feels threatened right now? Don't judge your answers. Just observe them with curiosity. You'll start to notice patterns. Maybe you consistently get triggered when people don't follow through on commitments because you value reliability. Maybe you react strongly to criticism because you have an unconscious fear of not being good enough. Maybe you get defensive when your expertise is questioned because competence is core to your identity. These insights are gold. They give you advance warning of situations where you'll need to be extra conscious about your response. The next level of awareness is somatic awareness, recognizing the physical sensations that accompany emotional activation. Your body always knows before your mind does that you're getting triggered. Your jaw might tighten, your shoulders might rise, your breathing might become shallow, or your stomach might clench. These physical signals are your early warning system, but only if you're paying attention to them. Practice what I call body scanning throughout your day. Every hour, take 30 seconds to notice what's happening in your body. Are your muscles tense or relaxed? Is your breathing deep or shallow? Is your jaw clenched or loose? Are your shoulders raised or dropped? This isn't about fixing anything. It's about developing awareness. The goal is to catch emotional activation in its early stages when you still have maximum choice about your response. Another crucial aspect of awareness is understanding your personal stress patterns. Some people's stress builds gradually throughout the day until they explode over something minor. Others can handle major challenges well but get triggered by unexpected disruptions. Some people's emotional regulation is affected by lack of sleep, hunger, or overstimulation. Others are more sensitive to social dynamics or time pressure. Start tracking your emotional patterns in relation to these variables. Are you more reactive when you're hungry? Do you lose emotional control more easily when you're overstimulated? Are you more likely to react poorly to criticism early in the morning or late at night? This isn't about making excuses for poor behavior. It's about understanding your optimal conditions for emotional regulation and planning accordingly. The most advanced level of awareness is what psychologists call metacognition, thinking about thinking. This is the ability to observe your own mental processes in real time. Instead of being lost in your thoughts and emotions, you develop the capacity to step back and watch them, like a scientist observing an experiment. You notice thoughts like, "I'm telling myself that he did this on purpose," or "I'm making this situation more dramatic than it needs to be." This observer perspective is incredibly powerful because it automatically creates space between you and your emotional reactions. When you can observe your thoughts and emotions instead of being consumed by them, you're already well on your way to choosing your response. You realize that thoughts and emotions are just information. They don't have to control your behavior unless you choose to let them. The key to developing this observer perspective is practice without judgment. Every time you catch yourself in a reactive state, instead of criticizing yourself for reacting, celebrate yourself for noticing. Awareness itself is the first step toward change. You can't change what you can't see, but once you can see it clearly, change becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Chapter 5. The Pause Power Method. Now we get to the practical heart of response mastery. The ability to create conscious pause between stimulus and response. This isn't about counting to 10 or taking a timeout. This is about training your nervous system to automatically create space for conscious choice, even in high-pressure situations. This single skill will transform every area of your life. The foundation of the pause power method is what I call the sacred second. That crucial moment when you recognize you've been triggered, but before you've reacted. In that second, you have the opportunity to activate your prefrontal cortex and choose your response consciously. But here's what most people don't realize. This second isn't just available sometimes. It's available every single time if you know how to access it. The first technique is the 5-second reset. The moment you notice any sign of emotional activation, whether it's physical tension, mental reactivity, or the urge to respond immediately, you count slowly from 5 to 1 while taking deep breaths. 5. Breathe in slowly. 4. Breathe out completely. 3. Notice your body. 2. Activate your rational mind. 1. Choose your response. This isn't just distraction. You're literally giving your prefrontal cortex time to come online and take control. But here's where most people go wrong with breathing techniques. They try to breathe differently when they're already activated. The key is to train your breathing when you're calm so it becomes an automatic response when you're triggered. Practice the 5-second reset 10 times every morning when you're completely relaxed. This programs your nervous system to associate this breathing pattern with calmness and control. The second technique is somatic grounding. When your amygdala activates, it disconnects you from your body and pulls you into your head, where anxiety and reactivity live. Grounding brings you back into your physical body, where calmness and strength exist. The moment you feel triggered, immediately focus on the sensation of your feet on the ground, the feeling of your back against your chair, or the weight of your hands on your desk. This isn't metaphysical, it's neuroscience. Physical grounding activates your parasympathetic nervous system and calms your stress response. The third technique is what I call cognitive labeling. When you notice emotional activation, immediately name what you're experiencing out loud or in your mind. I'm feeling defensive. I'm noticing anger. I'm experiencing the urge to interrupt. This simple act of labeling activates your prefrontal cortex and creates psychological distance from the emotion. Research shows that labeling emotions reduces amygdala reactivity by up to 30% almost immediately. The fourth technique is perspective zooming. When you're triggered, your awareness collapses down to the immediate threat. Your entire world becomes this moment, this conversation, this problem. Perspective zooming deliberately expands your awareness. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? How will I want to have handled this when I look back? What would the highest version of myself do right now? This shifts you from survival thinking to strategic thinking. The fifth technique is values anchoring. Before you respond to any trigger, quickly connect with your deepest values. If you value respect, ask yourself how you can respond respectfully. If you value growth, ask how you can use this situation to become stronger. If you value connection, ask how you can respond in a way that brings people closer together rather than pushing them apart. This ensures that your response comes from your highest self rather than your reactive self. The most powerful aspect of the pause power method is that it works even when you don't feel like using it. When you're triggered, your brain will tell you that you don't have time to pause, that the situation is too urgent, that the other person doesn't deserve a measured response. This is exactly when you need these techniques most. The goal isn't to feel like pausing. The goal is to pause regardless of how you feel. Here's how to make this automatic. For the next 30 days, use the pause power method in low-stakes situations. When someone cuts you off in traffic, when your computer runs slowly, when you're waiting in line longer than expected, use these minor irritations as training grounds for major challenges. Every time you successfully pause and respond, instead of react to a small trigger, you're strengthening the neural pathways that will serve you when the stakes are high. The advanced version of the pause power method involves training yourself to find the pause even in rapid-fire conversations. When someone says something that triggers you in a meeting, instead of immediately responding, you can say, "That's an interesting point. Let me think about that for a moment." This gives you the pause you need while appearing thoughtful rather than reactive. Or you can ask a clarifying question. "Help me understand what you mean by that." This buys you time while keeping the conversation productive. Remember, the goal isn't to never feel triggered. The goal is to feel triggered and respond wisely anyway. Every time you successfully use the pause power method, you're proving to yourself that you have choice, that you have control, and that you can trust yourself to handle whatever life brings you with grace and wisdom. This builds a deep confidence that transforms how you show up in the world. Chapter 6. Advanced Emotional Regulation Techniques. Now that you've mastered the foundation of pausing, we're going to take your emotional regulation to the expert level. These are the techniques that separate those who occasionally respond well from those who consistently maintain emotional mastery. Even in the most challenging situations, this is where you become truly unshakable. The first advanced technique is what I call emotional surfing. Instead of trying to suppress or avoid difficult emotions, you learn to ride them like a surfer rides a wave. When you feel anger, anxiety, or frustration building, instead of fighting it or being consumed by it, you observe it with curious detachment. You notice where you feel it in your body, how it moves and changes, and how it naturally rises and falls if you don't feed it with reactive thoughts. Here's how emotional surfing works in practice. The moment you notice strong emotion arising, immediately shift into observer mode. Say to yourself, "I'm noticing anger in my chest and throat. It feels hot and tight. My breathing is getting shallow. My jaw is clenching." This scientific observation activates your prefrontal cortex and prevents the emotion from hijacking your entire system. You're experiencing the emotion fully without being controlled by it. The key insight is that all emotions are temporary and self-limiting if you don't amplify them with reactive thinking. Anger naturally lasts about 90 seconds if you don't feed it with thoughts about how wrong the other person is. Anxiety naturally dissipates if you don't catastrophize about worst-case scenarios. Fear naturally transforms into excitement if you don't tell yourself stories about all the things that could go wrong. The second advanced technique is physiological regulation through controlled breathing patterns. Your breath is the bridge between your conscious and unconscious mind, between your voluntary and involuntary nervous systems. When you control your breathing deliberately, you can literally reprogram your entire physiological state in real time. The most powerful breathing pattern for emotional regulation is what's called box breathing. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, breathe out for 4 counts, hold empty for 4 counts. Repeat this cycle 10 times whenever you feel emotionally activated. This pattern balances your autonomic nervous system, reduces cortisol production, and activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calm, clear thinking. But here's the advanced application. You can customize your breathing patterns for different emotional states. When you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, extend your exhale to be twice as long as your inhale. This activates your vagus nerve and sends immediate calming signals to your brain. When you're feeling low energy or unmotivated, make your inhale longer than your exhale to energize your system. When you need laser focus, use equal count breathing with brief retention. The third advanced technique is cognitive reappraisal in real time. This is the ability to consciously reframe a situation while you're still in it, not just afterwards when you're reflecting on what happened. Most people get stuck in their initial interpretation of events, but master responders can shift their perspective instantly to create better outcomes. Here's how real-time reappraisal works. When someone criticizes your work, instead of immediately thinking, "They're attacking me," you can instantly reframe it as, "They're giving me valuable feedback that could make this better." When someone cancels plans last minute, instead of thinking, "They don't respect my time," you can reframe it as, "I just got an unexpected opportunity to work on my own projects." When you face an unexpected challenge, instead of thinking, "This is a disaster," you can reframe it as, "This is a chance to prove my resilience and problem-solving skills." The key to making reappraisal automatic is to practice it consciously with minor irritations until it becomes your natural response to major challenges. Every traffic jam becomes practice for patience. Every technical difficulty becomes practice for creative problem-solving. Every interpersonal conflict becomes practice for communication skills. You're literally rewiring your brain to find opportunity and growth in every situation. The fourth advanced technique is energy management through emotional granularity. Most people have a very limited emotional vocabulary. They're either fine, good, bad, or stressed. But research shows that people who can identify and name their emotions with precision have significantly better emotional regulation and decision-making abilities. Instead of saying you're upset, train yourself to identify whether you're disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, or discouraged. Each of these emotions contains different information and requires different responses. Disappointment might need acceptance and revised expectations. Frustration might need problem-solving action. Overwhelm might need prioritization and delegation. Anxiety might need grounding and perspective. Discouragement might need connection and encouragement. The more precisely you can identify your emotional state, the more precisely you can respond to it. This prevents you from applying the wrong solution to the wrong problem, which often makes emotional situations worse rather than better. The fifth advanced technique is what I call emotional Aikido, using the energy of difficult emotions to create positive outcomes. In martial arts, Aikido teaches you to redirect an opponent's force rather than meeting it with opposing force. The same principle applies to emotional mastery. Instead of fighting against difficult emotions or trying to push them away, you learn to redirect their energy toward positive action. When someone makes you angry, instead of attacking them back, you can redirect that energy into passionate advocacy for what you believe in. When you feel anxious about a challenge, you can redirect that energy into thorough preparation and strategic planning. When you feel hurt by someone's behavior, you can redirect that energy into deeper self-care and boundary setting. Every difficult emotion contains energy that can be transformed into positive action if you know how to work with it skillfully. The mastery level of emotional regulation is developing what psychologists call emotional flexibility, the ability to match your emotional response to what the situation actually requires, rather than just reacting from your habitual patterns. Sometimes a situation calls for firmness, sometimes for compassion, sometimes for humor, sometimes for serious focus. Master responders can access the full range of human emotional responses and choose the one that will be most effective for achieving their goals and maintaining their relationships. Chapter 7. The Reframing Revolution. Your mind is constantly creating stories about what happens to you, and these stories determine your emotional state and your response choices more than the actual events themselves. The difference between someone who responds wisely and someone who reacts destructively often comes down to one thing: the quality of the stories they tell themselves about what's happening. This is where reframing becomes your most powerful tool for transformation. Most people don't realize they're constantly interpreting events and that their interpretations are choices, not facts. When your boss gives you critical feedback, you might immediately think, "I'm in trouble," or "I'm not good at my job." But these are interpretations, not facts. The fact is simply that your boss shared their perspective on your work. Everything else is a story you're adding to that fact. And that story is what determines your emotional response and your next actions. The foundation of reframing mastery is understanding the difference between facts and interpretations. Facts are observable, measurable, and verifiable. Sarah didn't respond to my text message is a fact. Sarah is ignoring me. Sarah doesn't care about me, or Sarah is angry with me, are all interpretations. The fact itself is emotionally neutral. It's your interpretation that creates the emotional charge and determines whether you'll respond wisely or react defensively. Here's the revolutionary insight that changes everything. You can choose your interpretations consciously. You don't have to accept the first story your mind creates about what's happening. You can evaluate that story objectively and ask yourself, is this interpretation helpful? Is it accurate? Is it serving my goals and relationships? If the answer is no, you can consciously choose a different interpretation that serves you better. The most powerful reframing technique is what I call the 3 perspectives method. Whenever you find yourself upset about a situation, you consciously generate 3 different interpretations of what's happening. The first is your automatic interpretation, the story your reactive mind immediately created. The second is the most generous interpretation you can imagine. What would you think if you assumed everyone involved had positive intentions and was doing their best? The third is the most empowering interpretation. What story about this situation would leave you feeling most capable and motivated to create a positive outcome? Let's say a colleague interrupts you during a presentation. Your automatic interpretation might be, they're trying to undermine me, or they don't respect me. The generous interpretation might be, they're excited about the topic and want to contribute, or they just thought of something important they didn't want to forget. The empowering interpretation might be, this is an opportunity to demonstrate my expertise by handling the interruption gracefully, or this shows that my presentation is generating engagement and discussion. Notice that all 3 interpretations could be true. You don't have access to your colleague's internal motivations, but they create completely different emotional states and response options. The first interpretation leads to defensiveness and conflict. The second leads to understanding and patience. The third leads to confidence and skillful action. You have the power to choose which story you believe and act from. Another advanced reframing technique is temporal reframing, consciously shifting your time perspective to reduce emotional reactivity. When you're in the middle of a challenging situation, it feels permanent and overwhelming. But master responders train themselves to zoom out and see the bigger picture. They ask questions like, how will I view this situation in 5 years? Or, what will matter most about this when I'm looking back from the end of my life? This temporal shift almost automatically reduces the emotional charge of difficult situations. That presentation that feels like it could make or break your career becomes just one of hundreds of presentations you'll give. That argument with your partner becomes a minor disagreement in the context of a lifetime relationship. That financial setback becomes temporary turbulence in a long-term wealth-building journey. The most advanced reframing skill is what I call anti-fragile reframing, interpreting every challenge as an opportunity to become stronger, wiser, or more skillful. This goes beyond positive thinking or optimism. This is about recognizing that human beings are anti-fragile. We actually grow stronger under certain types of stress and challenge. Every difficult situation contains the seeds of greater capability if you know how to extract the lessons and apply them. When you face criticism, you can reframe it as strength training for your confidence and communication skills. When you face rejection, you can reframe it as clarity about where you don't belong, so you can find where you do belong. When you face failure, you can reframe it as valuable data that brings you closer to success. When you face conflict, you can reframe it as practice for your emotional regulation and relationship skills. The key to making reframing automatic is to practice it consciously with small irritations until it becomes your natural response to major challenges. Every minor inconvenience becomes an opportunity to strengthen your reframing skills. When your coffee shop is out of your favorite drink, you practice reframing it as an adventure to try something new. When traffic is heavy, you practice reframing it as bonus time to listen to educational content or practice breathing techniques. When technology doesn't work properly, you practice reframing it as an opportunity to develop patience and problem-solving skills. The ultimate reframing skill is learning to see yourself as the hero of your own story rather than the victim of your circumstances. Victims focus on what's happening to them and how unfair or difficult it is. Heroes focus on how they're going to respond and what they're going to learn from the experience. Heroes understand that every challenge is a chapter in their growth story, and they're excited to see how they'll rise to meet it. Chapter 8: Identity Transformation. Becoming a responder. The deepest level of response mastery isn't about techniques or strategies. It's about fundamentally shifting your identity from someone who reacts to life to someone who consciously responds to life. This identity shift changes everything because your actions always align with your identity. If you see yourself as someone who gets triggered easily, you'll find ways to get triggered. If you see yourself as someone who stays calm under pressure, you'll find ways to remain calm. Your current identity was formed through years of repetitive thoughts, emotions, and actions. Every time you reacted to a situation, you reinforced the identity of someone who reacts. Every time you told yourself, "I'm just not good with conflict," or "I have a short temper," or "I'm too sensitive," you strengthened neural pathways that support that identity. But here's the breakthrough. Identity is not fixed. You can consciously create a new identity through deliberate practice and repetition. The first step in identity transformation is becoming crystal clear about who you want to become. Don't focus on what you want to stop doing, focus on who you want to be. Instead of, "I want to stop being reactive," declare, "I am someone who responds to challenges with wisdom and grace." Instead of, "I want to stop getting defensive," declare, "I am someone who receives feedback with curiosity and appreciation." Instead of, "I want to stop losing my temper," declare, "I am someone who maintains emotional equilibrium even under pressure." This isn't just positive thinking. This is identity programming. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what you tell it and what actually happens. When you repeatedly declare your new identity with emotion and conviction, your subconscious begins to accept it as reality and starts aligning your thoughts, emotions, and actions with that identity. The second step is what I call identity evidence gathering. Your mind is constantly looking for evidence to support your current identity. If you believe you're reactive, you'll notice and remember every time you react. and you'll minimize or forget times when you respond well. To shift your identity, you need to consciously gather evidence for your new identity while reinterpreting evidence for your old identity. Every time you successfully pause before responding, celebrate it as evidence that you are becoming someone who responds wisely. Every time you reframe a situation positively, acknowledge it as proof that you are someone who finds opportunity in challenge. Every time you stay calm when you used to get triggered, recognize it as confirmation that you are transforming into someone with unshakable emotional mastery. Equally important is reinterpreting your reactive moments. Instead of using them as evidence that you haven't changed, use them as valuable feedback about areas where you can improve. A master responder who occasionally reacts doesn't think, "I'm still reactive." They think, "I'm someone who's committed to continuous improvement in emotional mastery, and this reaction gives me valuable information about my triggers." The third step is environmental design for identity reinforcement. Your environment constantly influences your identity through the people you spend time with, the content you consume, and the activities you engage in. If you want to become someone who responds rather than reacts, you need to immerse yourself in an environment that supports and reinforces this identity. Surround yourself with people who model emotional maturity and conscious response. Read books, listen to podcasts, and consume content that reinforces the mindset and skills of someone who has mastered emotional regulation. Practice response skills regularly, not just when you're triggered, so that they become automatic parts of who you are. Create physical reminders in your environment that reinforce your new identity. This might be a note on your computer that says, "I respond with wisdom," a bracelet that reminds you to pause before reacting, or a photo that represents the calm, composed person you're becoming. These environmental cues help program your subconscious mind with your new identity. The fourth step is what I call identity integration through visualization and mental rehearsal. Your brain creates neural pathways based on what you repeatedly imagine just as much as what you repeatedly experience. Master athletes use visualization to program perfect performance, and you can use the same technique to program perfect emotional responses. Every day, spend 10 minutes visualizing yourself responding beautifully to challenging situations. See yourself receiving criticism with curiosity instead of defensiveness. Imagine yourself staying calm and strategic when someone is aggressive with you. Picture yourself handling unexpected problems with grace and creativity. Feel the emotions of pride, confidence, and inner peace that come from knowing you can handle whatever life brings you. Make these visualizations as vivid and detailed as possible. See the situations from your own eyes, not like watching a movie. Include all the sensory details, what you see, hear, feel, and even smell. Most importantly, focus on the identity you're embodying. Not just what you're doing, but who you're being. You're not just practicing techniques, you're becoming someone who naturally responds with wisdom and emotional mastery. The fifth step is progressive identity expansion. Start by embodying your new identity in low-stakes situations where it's easier to succeed, then gradually expand into more challenging contexts. Begin by practicing conscious response with minor irritations like slow internet or long lines. As you build confidence and evidence for your new identity, challenge yourself with more difficult situations, like workplace conflicts or family disagreements. Each success builds your identity as someone who can handle increasingly difficult challenges with grace and wisdom. You're not trying to become perfect overnight. You're gradually expanding your capacity for conscious response until it becomes your natural way of being in the world. The transformation is complete when responding consciously no longer feels like something you do but simply becomes who you are. You don't have to remind yourself to pause or use techniques. You naturally create space between stimulus and response, because that's just how you operate. People start to see you as someone who's calm under pressure, wise in conflict, and emotionally mature in all situations. Most importantly, you start to see yourself this way too. Chapter 9. Real World Response Mastery. Now it's time to take everything you've learned and apply it to the specific, challenging situations you face in your daily life. This is where theory becomes transformation, where techniques become second nature, where you prove to yourself that you truly have mastered the art of response over reaction. We're going to walk through the most common trigger situations and exactly how to handle each one with grace and effectiveness. Let's start with workplace conflicts, because this is where reactive behavior can have the most immediate and visible consequences for your career and reputation. Picture this scenario. You're in a meeting, and a colleague publicly disagrees with your proposal in a way that feels dismissive or disrespectful. Your immediate impulse might be to defend yourself, prove them wrong, or dismiss their concerns. But a master responder handles this completely differently. First, you recognize the physical sensations of being triggered. Maybe your face feels flushed, your jaw tightens, or your heart rate increases. Instead of speaking immediately, you take one conscious breath to activate your prefrontal cortex. Then you use cognitive reframing in real time. Instead of thinking, "They're attacking me," you think, "They have concerns that might make this proposal better." Instead of focusing on being right, you focus on the outcome you want to create, which is probably a successful project, not winning an argument. Your response might sound like this: "I appreciate you bringing up those concerns. Tom, help me understand more about your perspective on the risks you're seeing." This response accomplishes multiple things simultaneously. It demonstrates that you can handle disagreement professionally. It gathers information that might actually improve your proposal. It keeps the focus on the project's success rather than personal ego. And it models emotional maturity that enhances your reputation as a leader. The key insight is that workplace conflicts are never really about the surface issue. They're always about respect, recognition, competence, or control. When someone challenges your idea, they might really be saying, "I want my expertise to be valued," or "I'm concerned about being blamed if this goes wrong." When you respond to the underlying need instead of just the surface challenge, you often transform conflicts into collaboration. Now let's tackle personal relationships, where emotional triggers run deeper because the stakes feel higher. Imagine your partner says something that feels critical or dismissive. Your reactive brain immediately interprets this as an attack on your worth or a threat to the relationship. Your impulse might be to defend yourself, criticize them back, or withdraw and shut down. But master responders understand that intimate relationships require a different kind of response mastery. The first step is recognizing that your partner's behavior is usually about their own internal state, not about you. If they're being critical, They might be feeling overwhelmed, unappreciated, or disconnected. If they're being distant, they might be processing something difficult or feeling insecure. This doesn't excuse hurtful behavior, but it helps you respond to the person instead of just reacting to the behavior. Your response might sound like this: I'm noticing that what you just said brought up some hurt for me, and I want to understand what's going on for you right now. Are you feeling stressed about something? This response accomplishes several things. It takes responsibility for your own emotional experience without blaming them. It expresses vulnerability rather than defensiveness. It invites connection instead of escalating conflict. And it demonstrates the emotional maturity that deepens intimacy over time. The advanced skill in relationship response mastery is learning to repair quickly when you do react poorly. Even master responders occasionally get triggered and say things they regret. The difference is that they take responsibility quickly, repair the disconnection, and use the experience to strengthen the relationship rather than damage it. A simple repair might sound like, I realize I got defensive just now instead of really listening to you. I care about understanding your perspective. Can we start over? Let's address one of the most challenging contexts for response mastery: dealing with truly difficult or unreasonable people. These are situations where someone is being aggressive, manipulative, or deliberately provocative. Your reactive brain will tell you that these situations require strong defensive responses. But master responders know that difficult people are actually the best teachers for advanced emotional regulation skills. The key principle is that you cannot control other people's behavior, but you can control your response to their behavior. When someone is being unreasonable, your goal isn't to make them reasonable. It's to maintain your own center while protecting your boundaries. This might mean staying calm while clearly stating what you will and won't accept. It might mean asking clarifying questions that help diffuse their reactivity. Or it might mean removing yourself from the situation while maintaining your dignity. Your response to difficult behavior might sound like this: I can see that you feel strongly about this. I want to find a solution that works for both of us, and I think we'll be more successful if we can keep this conversation respectful. Are you willing to work with me on that? This response acknowledges their emotion without accepting poor treatment. It maintains focus on solutions rather than getting drawn into drama, and it gives them an opportunity to regulate their own behavior. High-pressure situations like public speaking, job interviews, or performance evaluations require a different kind of response mastery. These situations trigger anxiety and self-doubt, which can cause you to react by over-preparing to the point of paralysis, avoiding the situation entirely, or performing below your capability because you're focused on your nervousness rather than your competence. Master responders reframe high-pressure situations as opportunities to demonstrate their skills rather than threats to their security. They use pre-performance rituals that activate confidence and focus rather than anxiety and doubt. This might include visualization exercises where they see themselves performing excellently, physical warm-ups that release tension and activate energy, or affirmations that reinforce their identity as someone who thrives under pressure. During the high-pressure situation, they focus their attention on serving their audience or achieving their goals rather than monitoring their own performance anxiously. They breathe deeply to maintain access to their full intelligence and creativity. And they remember that their worth as a person isn't determined by their performance in any single situation. The ultimate test of response mastery is handling truly unexpected crises or emergencies. These are situations where you don't have time to think through techniques or strategies. 2. You have to respond from your trained instincts. This is where all your practice with minor irritations pays off. When you've trained yourself to pause and respond consciously to small triggers, this capacity automatically extends to large triggers as well. The goal isn't to never feel stressed or scared in crisis situations. The goal is to think clearly and act effectively, even while experiencing intense emotions. Master responders can feel fear while still assessing their options rationally. They can feel overwhelmed while still prioritizing actions effectively. They can feel angry while still communicating strategically. Chapter 10. The compound effect of conscious response. As we reach the culmination of this training, I want you to understand that mastering response over reaction isn't just about handling individual situations better. It's about completely transforming the trajectory of your entire life. Every conscious response you make creates ripple effects that compound over time, building momentum toward the life, relationships, and success you truly want. Think of your life as a series of decision points, each one creating a branch in your personal timeline. Every time you react unconsciously, you're choosing a path that leads toward more drama, stress, and limitation. Every time you respond consciously, you're choosing a path that leads toward more peace, effectiveness, and possibility. These choices might seem small in the moment, but their compound effect over months and years is absolutely massive. Consider your professional life. Every time you respond to criticism with openness instead of defensiveness, you're building a reputation as someone who's coachable and growth-oriented. Every time you handle conflict with wisdom, instead of reactivity, you're demonstrating leadership qualities that get noticed by decision-makers. Every time you stay calm under pressure, instead of getting overwhelmed, you're proving that you can be trusted with greater responsibility. Over time, these conscious responses compound into career acceleration. You get promoted faster because people trust your judgment. You're included in important projects because you're known for handling challenges well. You're offered opportunities because your reputation precedes you. Your entire professional trajectory shifts upward because you've trained yourself to respond rather than react consistently over time. The compound effect is even more profound in your relationships. Every time you respond to your partner's stress with compassion instead of taking it personally, you're making deposits into the emotional bank account of your relationship. Every time you respond to your children's challenging behavior with patience instead of frustration, you're building their sense of safety and your bond with them. Every time you respond to friends' needs with generosity instead of resentment, you're deepening connections that will support you throughout your life. These relationship investments compound exponentially. Your marriage becomes a source of strength rather than stress, because both partners feel safe to be vulnerable and authentic. Your children come to you with their real problems because they trust your response. Your friendships deepen into genuine support networks because people know they can count on you to show up with wisdom and care during difficult times. The compound effect on your mental and physical health is equally dramatic. Every time you respond to stress with conscious breathing instead of tension, you're training your nervous system to stay regulated. Every time you respond to challenges with reframing instead of catastrophizing, you're strengthening neural pathways that support optimism and resilience. Every time you respond to setbacks with learning instead of self-criticism, You're building unshakable confidence in your ability to handle whatever life brings you. Over months and years, these healthier response patterns compound into dramatically improved well-being. Your baseline stress level decreases significantly because you're not constantly activating fight or flight responses. Your sleep improves because you're not lying awake, rehashing conflicts or worrying about problems. Your energy increases because you're not depleting yourself with emotional drama. Your immune system strengthens because you're not chronically flooding your body with stress hormones. Perhaps most importantly, the compound effect of conscious response creates what I call gravitational transformation. You become the kind of person who naturally attracts positive people and opportunities into your life. When you consistently demonstrate emotional maturity, wisdom under pressure, and skillful communication, people want to be around you, work with you, and include you in their successes. This happens because conscious responders create what psychologists call psychological safety for the people around them. Others feel calmer, more creative, and more confident when they're with you, because they know you won't react unpredictably or create unnecessary drama. This makes you magnetic to other high-quality people who also value emotional maturity and conscious living. The advanced understanding is that your response mastery doesn't just benefit you, it benefits everyone in your environment through what neuroscientists call emotional contagion. When you remain calm and centered, you literally help regulate other people's nervous systems. When you respond to conflict with wisdom, you invite others to respond more wisely as well. When you model emotional maturity, you give others permission to evolve beyond their reactive patterns too. This creates positive feedback loops where your conscious responses inspire others to respond more consciously, which creates environments where everyone performs at higher levels, which attracts even more conscious people, which accelerates everyone's growth. You become a catalyst for positive transformation, not just in your own life, but in your entire social and professional ecosystem. The ultimate compound effect is that conscious response becomes your new identity and your natural way of being in the world. You no longer have to think about techniques or remember strategies. Responding wisely becomes as automatic as breathing. You develop what ancient wisdom traditions call unshakable presence, a deep inner stability that remains constant regardless of external circumstances. From this place of mastery, challenges become adventures, conflicts become opportunities for deeper connection, and setbacks become stepping stones to greater success. You've trained your mind so thoroughly that stress activates your creativity instead of your anxiety. Pressure activates your clarity instead of your confusion, and uncertainty activates your curiosity instead of your fear. The compound effect of years of conscious response is a life of increasing freedom, effectiveness, and fulfillment. You wake up each day knowing that whatever happens, you have the skills and awareness to handle it with grace. You move through the world with quiet confidence because you trust yourself completely to respond wisely to whatever arises. You've become the person you always had the potential to be, someone who shapes reality through conscious choice rather than being shaped by unconscious reaction. This is the promise and the power of training your mind to respond rather than react. Every pause you take, every breath you breathe, every conscious choice you make is an investment in the extraordinary life that awaits you on the other side of emotional mastery. The question isn't whether this transformation is possible. The question is whether you're ready to claim it. Chapter 11. The 90-Day Response Mastery Protocol. Now that you understand the principles and techniques of response mastery, it's time to create a systematic implementation plan that will make these skills automatic and permanent in your life. This isn't about trying harder or relying on willpower. This is about creating a structured 90-day protocol that rewires your brain through deliberate practice and progressive challenge. The reason we use a 90-day framework is based on neuroscience research that shows it takes approximately 66 to 90 days of consistent practice to create automatic neural pathways. During this period, you're literally rebuilding your brain's default response patterns. The first 30 days focus on awareness and basic pause techniques. The second 30 days focus on advanced regulation and reframing skills. The final 30 days focus on integration and real-world mastery. Days 1 through 30 are your foundation phase. Your primary focus during this month is developing trigger awareness and mastering the basic pause response. Every morning, spend 10 minutes practicing the 5-second reset breathing pattern when you're completely calm. This programs your nervous system to associate this breathing with peace and control, making it automatically available when you're triggered. Throughout each day, practice micro-pauses with minor irritations. When your computer loads slowly, pause and breathe before reacting with frustration. When someone cuts you off in traffic, pause and reframe before reacting with anger. When you have to wait longer than expected, pause and find gratitude before reacting with impatience. These small moments are your training ground for bigger challenges. Keep a daily response journal during this first month. Each evening, write down 3 situations where you noticed emotional activation, how you handled each one, and what you learned. Don't judge your performance. Simply observe and learn. You're building self-awareness and recognizing your personal trigger patterns. Most importantly, celebrate every small win. Every moment you pause instead of reacting immediately is evidence that you're rewiring your brain successfully. The key insight for this first month is that you're not trying to be perfect. You're simply trying to increase your awareness of the space between stimulus and response. Some days you'll catch yourself after you've already reacted. And that's still progress, because awareness is the first step toward change. Some days you'll catch yourself in the middle of reacting and choose a different path, which is even better. And some days you'll pause before reacting at all, which is excellent. Days 31 through 60 are your development phase. Now that you've built basic awareness and pause skills, you're ready to add advanced techniques. This month focuses on emotional regulation, cognitive reframing, and identity shifting. You're moving from simply stopping reactive patterns to actively creating wise response patterns. Each morning during this phase, spend 15 minutes doing visualization exercises where you see yourself responding beautifully to challenging situations. Picture yourself receiving criticism with curiosity, handling conflict with grace, and staying calm under pressure. Make these visualizations as vivid as possible, including how it feels emotionally to respond with such mastery. You're programming your subconscious mind with new patterns of response. Throughout each day, practice advanced reframing techniques with medium-level challenges. When someone is difficult or unreasonable, practice the 3 perspectives method to find generous and empowering interpretations. When you face setbacks or disappointments, practice temporal reframing to see the bigger picture. When you encounter criticism or feedback, practice anti-fragile reframing to find the growth opportunity hidden in the challenge. This is also when you begin deliberately seeking slightly uncomfortable situations to practice your skills. Volunteer to lead a meeting where you might face disagreement. Have a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Take on a project that stretches your abilities. You're not seeking stress for its own sake. You're seeking controlled challenges that allow you to practice response mastery in progressively more demanding situations. During this phase, your response journal evolves to include identity statements. Each evening, write one example of how you demonstrated your new identity as someone who responds rather than reacts. Focus on who you were being, not just what you were doing. I was someone who stayed curious when challenged. Or, I was someone who found opportunity in difficulty. Or, I was someone who remained centered under pressure. Days 61 through 90 are your mastery phase. This final month is about integration, automation, and real-world stress testing. Your response skills should now feel increasingly natural, and you're ready to handle more complex and challenging situations with confidence. The focus shifts from practicing techniques to embodying a new way of being. You're no longer someone who uses response techniques. You're someone who naturally responds with wisdom and emotional mastery. Your morning practice during this phase includes meditation or mindfulness exercises that reinforce your identity as someone with unshakable inner peace and clarity. Throughout each day, you actively seek leadership opportunities where you can model emotional maturity for others. You become the person who stays calm when everyone else is stressed, who finds solutions when others see only problems, who brings wisdom to conflicts and challenges. You're not just practicing for yourself anymore. You're becoming a source of stability and wisdom for your entire environment. This is also when you begin teaching these concepts to others, which deepens your own mastery. Share what you're learning with family members, colleagues, or friends who are struggling with emotional reactivity. Teaching forces you to understand the concepts at a deeper level and reinforces your own commitment to conscious response. The final week of your 90-day protocol includes a comprehensive review and integration process. Look back at your journals from all 3 phases and notice how much you've changed. Celebrate the transformation you've created through consistent practice and commitment. Set intentions for continuing your growth beyond the formal 90-day period. Most importantly, understand that this 90-day protocol isn't the end of your journey. It's the foundation for a lifetime of continuous growth in emotional mastery. You've built the neural pathways and established the habits that will serve you for the rest of your life. From this point forward, maintaining your response mastery requires only consistent practice and ongoing commitment to growth. The beauty of this systematic approach is that it works regardless of your starting point, your personality, or your past patterns of reactivity. The brain's capacity for neuroplasticity means that anyone can rewire their response patterns through deliberate practice. The 90-day protocol simply provides the structure and progression that makes this transformation both achievable and sustainable. Chapter 12: Overcoming Resistance and Setbacks. As you begin implementing response mastery in your life, you will encounter resistance both from your own mind and from your environment. This resistance isn't a sign that you're failing or that change is impossible. It's a natural and predictable part of any meaningful transformation. Understanding how to work with resistance rather than fighting against it is crucial for long-term success. The first type of resistance comes from your own subconscious mind, which is programmed to keep you safe by maintaining familiar patterns, even when those patterns no longer serve you. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between what's good for you and what's familiar to you. It simply tries to keep you operating in ways that have allowed you to survive so far. When you begin changing your response patterns, your subconscious will create thoughts and feelings designed to pull you back to your old ways. This internal resistance often shows up as thoughts like, "This is too hard. It's not working. I'm not the kind of person who can stay calm." Or, "I tried this before, and it didn't work." These thoughts feel very real and compelling, but they're simply your old programming trying to maintain itself. The key is to recognize these thoughts as resistance rather than truth, and to continue practicing anyway. The most effective way to overcome internal resistance is through what I call micro-commitments. Tiny, sustainable actions that build momentum without triggering your subconscious alarm system. Instead of trying to transform overnight, commit to just 5 minutes of morning breathing practice. Instead of attempting to never react again, commit to pausing just 1 second longer before responding. Instead of trying to love criticism, commit to taking one conscious breath when you receive feedback. These micro-commitments work because they're small enough to bypass your resistance while still creating real neurological change. Each tiny success builds evidence for your new identity and makes slightly bigger commitments feel achievable. Over time, these micro-commitments compound into massive transformation. The second type of resistance comes from your environment. The people, situations, and systems around you that are accustomed to your old patterns of reactivity. When you begin responding differently, others might unconsciously try to pull you back into familiar dynamics. Family members might escalate conflicts when you stop reacting defensively. Colleagues might test your boundaries when you stop responding with stress and overwhelm. This isn't malicious. It's simply human beings' unconscious tendency to maintain familiar patterns. Environmental resistance often shows up as increased provocations just as you're learning new response skills. It's almost as if the universe is testing your commitment to change by presenting you with especially challenging situations. People might seem more difficult. Circumstances might feel more stressful, and problems might appear more frequently. This is actually a positive sign. It means your new energy is shifting the dynamics around you. And these challenges are opportunities to solidify your new patterns. The key to handling environmental resistance is to remember that you can only control your own responses, not other people's behavior. Stay focused on your own growth rather than trying to change or control others. Continue practicing your response skills consistently, regardless of how others behave. Over time, as your new patterns become stable, the people around you will adjust to your new way of being, and the provocations will decrease. Setbacks are another inevitable part of the transformation process. You will have days when you react exactly as you used to, despite all your practice and progress. You might lose your temper, get overwhelmed by stress, or fall back into defensive patterns. These setbacks don't mean you're failing. They mean you're human. And they provide valuable information about areas where you need more practice. The crucial skill for handling setbacks is what I call rapid recovery. The ability to get back on track quickly without spiraling into self-criticism or giving up entirely. When you notice you've reacted poorly, immediately shift into learning mode rather than judgment mode. Ask yourself what triggered the reaction, what you can learn from the experience, and how you want to handle similar situations in the future. Most importantly, use setbacks as opportunities to practice self-compassion and recommitment. Treat yourself with the same kindness you would show a good friend who was learning a difficult skill. Acknowledge that learning new patterns takes time and practice, and that setbacks are a normal part of the process. Then recommit to your practice with renewed understanding rather than abandoning it out of discouragement. One of the most subtle forms of resistance is perfectionism, the belief that you should master these skills immediately and never struggle with emotional reactivity again. Perfectionism actually undermines your progress because it creates additional stress and self-judgment that make emotional regulation more difficult. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress and gradual improvement over time. Advanced practitioners understand that response mastery is a lifelong practice, not a destination. Even people who have practiced these skills for years occasionally get triggered and react in ways they regret. The difference is that they recover quickly, learn from the experience, and continue growing, rather than using temporary setbacks as evidence that change is impossible. Another common form of resistance is what psychologists call regression to the mean, the tendency to revert to old patterns during times of high stress or major life changes. When you're dealing with significant challenges like health problems, relationship difficulties, career transitions, or financial stress, your brain may default to familiar coping mechanisms even when you've been practicing new ones successfully. The key to navigating regression periods is to lower your expectations temporarily while maintaining your core practices. During highly stressful times, focus on the most basic response skills like conscious breathing and simple pauses. Don't try to be perfect. Just try to be slightly more conscious than you would have been in the past. These challenging periods often provide the most valuable opportunities for growth once you've navigated through them. Understanding and expecting resistance makes you much more likely to persist through the inevitable challenges of transformation. When you know that resistance is normal and temporary, you can work with it skillfully rather than being derailed by it. You develop what resilience researchers call implementation strength, the ability to continue moving toward your goals even when motivation is low or circumstances are difficult. The ultimate key to overcoming resistance is remembering your deeper why, the compelling reasons that motivated you to develop response mastery in the first place. When resistance arises, reconnect with your vision of who you want to become and how you want to impact the world. Remember the relationships you want to improve, the career success you want to achieve, and the inner peace you want to experience. This deeper motivation will carry you through temporary challenges and setbacks. Chapter 13. Advanced Integration Strategies. At this level of development, response mastery becomes less about using specific techniques and more about embodying a fundamentally different way of being in the world. You're moving beyond reactive and responsive patterns into what I call proactive presence, a state where you're not just managing your reactions, but actively creating positive outcomes through your conscious awareness and intentional responses. Advanced integration begins with understanding that every interaction is an opportunity to practice and demonstrate mastery. Whether you're ordering coffee, checking email, or attending a high-stakes meeting, you're consistently operating from your centered, conscious self, rather than switching between reactive and responsive modes. This consistency is what creates the gravitational transformation we discussed earlier. The first advanced integration strategy is what I call situational leadership of energy. This means consciously choosing to be the person who elevates the emotional and mental state of any environment you enter. When you walk into a stressed team meeting, you become the source of calm focus. When you encounter interpersonal conflict, you become the catalyst for resolution and understanding. When you face unexpected challenges, you become the person who finds opportunity and maintains optimism. This isn't about being artificially positive or suppressing authentic emotions. It's about having developed such strong emotional regulation and perspective skills that you can remain centered and resourceful even in difficult situations, and use that centeredness to help others access their own wisdom and capability. To develop this capacity, practice what I call emotional preloading. Before entering challenging environments, before walking into a stressful workplace, spend 2 minutes visualizing yourself as a source of calm competence. Before entering a difficult family gathering, connect with your intention to be loving and patient regardless of others' behavior. Before attending a high-pressure social event, anchor yourself in confidence and genuine interest in others. The second advanced integration strategy is micro-leadership moments, recognizing and leveraging the thousands of small opportunities each day to demonstrate and model emotional mastery. This might be staying patient when technology doesn't work properly, while others around you get frustrated. It might be asking thoughtful questions when others are making quick judgments. It might be offering perspective when others are caught in drama or stress. These micro moments compound into macro influence over time. People begin to see you as someone who can be counted on to bring wisdom and stability to any situation. This reputation opens doors, creates opportunities, and attracts higher quality relationships and professional collaborations. The third strategy is systems level response mastery. Recognizing that your individual response patterns are part of larger systems, including family dynamics, organizational culture, and social networks. As you develop mastery, you begin to influence these systems positively rather than just adapting to them. In family systems, this might mean being the person who breaks generational patterns of reactivity and conflict. Instead of perpetuating familiar dramatic dynamics, you model healthy communication and emotional regulation. Over time, this influences the entire family system toward greater health and functionality. In organizational systems, this might mean being the leader who creates psychological safety and high performance through emotional intelligence rather than pressure and control. You become known for your ability to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics, manage difficult personalities, and maintain team effectiveness even during challenging periods. The fourth strategy is what I call adaptive response mastery. Developing the flexibility to match your response style to what each situation actually requires rather than having a limited range of responses. Sometimes a situation calls for gentle compassion, sometimes for firm boundaries, sometimes for playful humor, sometimes for serious focus. Master responders can access the full spectrum of human emotional and behavioral responses and choose consciously which one will be most effective. This requires developing what psychologists call emotional granularity. the ability to identify and express subtle distinctions in emotional states. Instead of having just a few emotional gears like happy, sad, angry, or stressed, you develop access to dozens of emotional states like curious, determined, playful, focused, compassionate, firm, creative, or strategic. This expanded emotional vocabulary allows for much more precise and effective responses. The fifth strategy is legacy-level integration, operating from the perspective of the long-term impact you want to have on the people and systems around you. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to contribute to the legacy you want to leave. Every response becomes a chance to model the kind of consciousness and wisdom you want to see more of in the world. This perspective shifts you from thinking about immediate outcomes to considering generational impact. How do you want to be remembered by your children and their children? What kind of influence do you want to have on your industry or profession? How do you want to contribute to the evolution of human consciousness and wisdom? Operating from this legacy perspective naturally calls forth your highest and wisest responses. It becomes much easier to choose patience over reactivity when you remember that your children are learning how to handle stress by watching you. It becomes easier to choose integrity over expediency when you remember that your professional reputation will influence opportunities for decades. The most advanced integration strategy is what I call effortless mastery. The point where conscious response becomes so natural and automatic that it requires no effort or intention. You no longer have to remember to pause or choose your response. You naturally create space between stimulus and response, because that's simply how your nervous system operates now. At this level, emotional triggers don't disappear, but they're processed so quickly and skillfully that others rarely notice them. You might feel a momentary flash of irritation, disappointment, or concern, but it passes through your system like weather through the sky without creating reactive storms. This effortless mastery isn't achieved through willpower or control. It emerges naturally through years of consistent practice and integration. Like a master musician who no longer thinks about finger placement or breathing technique, you no longer think about response strategies because they've become integrated into your identity and automatic nervous system functioning. The beautiful paradox of advanced integration is that as your skills become more sophisticated and powerful, they also become more simple and natural. You're not using complex techniques or strategies. You're simply being yourself. But yourself has been transformed through dedicated practice into someone who embodies wisdom, emotional mastery, and conscious response as natural ways of being. Chapter 14. Maintaining momentum and lifelong growth. Response mastery isn't a skill you learn once and then maintain without effort. It's a capacity that either grows stronger through consistent practice or gradually weakens through neglect. The difference between people who maintain their emotional mastery over decades and those who slowly revert to reactive patterns comes down to understanding how to sustain momentum and continue growing throughout their lives. The foundation of lifelong mastery is what I call practice integration, weaving response mastery skills into your daily life so seamlessly that maintaining them requires no additional time or effort. Instead of thinking of emotional regulation as something you do in addition to your regular activities, you transform your regular activities into opportunities for continuous practice and refinement. Your morning routine becomes practice for centering and intention setting. Your commute becomes practice for patience and present moment awareness. Your work interactions become practice for conscious communication and conflict resolution. Your evening routine becomes practice for reflection and gratitude. Every aspect of your day serves your ongoing development in emotional mastery. The key insight is that maintaining momentum doesn't require perfection or constant attention to your emotional state. It requires consistent, small practices that keep your skills sharp and your identity as a conscious responder strong. Just as physical fitness is maintained through regular movement rather than perfect workouts, emotional fitness is maintained through regular practice rather than perfect responses. One of the most effective maintenance strategies is what I call micro-challenge seeking. Instead of waiting for stressful situations to test your skills, you actively seek small opportunities to practice advanced response capabilities. This might mean volunteering for projects that stretch your comfort zone, having conversations you've been avoiding, or taking on responsibilities that require you to stay calm under pressure. These self-initiated challenges serve multiple purposes. They keep your skills sharp by providing regular practice opportunities. They build confidence by proving to yourself that you can handle increasingly difficult situations. And they prevent the gradual erosion of capacity that happens when you only practice during naturally occurring stress. Another crucial element is developing what resilience researchers call stress inoculation, deliberately exposing yourself to manageable levels of stress and challenge so that you maintain your capacity to handle higher levels when they arise naturally. This is like a vaccination that builds immunity by exposing you to small doses of what you want to be protected against. Stress inoculation might involve practices like cold exposure, challenging physical exercise, public speaking, or meditation retreats. Activities that activate your stress response in controlled ways, while you practice maintaining emotional regulation and clear thinking. The goal isn't to seek stress for its own sake, but to maintain your resilience and response capacity through regular, voluntary challenge. The social dimension of maintaining momentum is equally important. Surround yourself with people who support and model emotional maturity rather than drama and reactivity. Join groups, communities, or professional networks where conscious response and personal growth are valued and encouraged. These relationships provide both accountability and inspiration for continued development. Consider finding mentors who have mastered the skills you're still developing. And also, become a mentor to others who are earlier in their journey. Teaching and modeling response mastery for others deepens your own understanding and commitment to these principles. You develop what psychologists call virtuous competence, the satisfaction that comes from using your skills in service of others' growth and well-being. Regular self-assessment and course correction are essential for lifelong growth. Every month, honestly evaluate your progress in key areas like emotional regulation, response quality, relationship satisfaction, and professional effectiveness. Notice areas where you're growing stronger and areas where you might be sliding backward. Adjust your practices and focus accordingly. This self-assessment isn't about self-criticism or perfectionism. It's about maintaining awareness of your ongoing development and making conscious choices about where to invest your growth energy. Sometimes you might need to focus more on patience and understanding in family relationships. Other times, you might need to develop greater assertiveness and boundary setting in professional contexts. The concept of mastery phases is crucial for maintaining motivation over long periods. Understand that your development in response mastery will go through natural cycles of rapid growth, plateau periods, and integration phases. During rapid growth phases, you'll notice dramatic improvements in your emotional regulation and response quality. These periods are exciting and motivating. Plateau periods can be more challenging because progress feels slower or even stagnant. During these times, focus on refinement and deepening rather than dramatic change. You might work on subtle aspects like the quality of your presence, the elegance of your communication, or the consistency of your responses across different contexts. Integration phases are when new capabilities become automatic and natural. These periods might not feel like growth because the skills have become so integrated into your identity that you don't notice them anymore. Trust that this integration is actually a sign of deep mastery rather than lack of progress. One of the most important long-term strategies is developing what I call growth curiosity, maintaining genuine interest in your own development and the ongoing refinement of your response capabilities. Instead of thinking, "I've learned this already," cultivate attitudes like, "I wonder how I can respond even more skillfully to this type of situation," or "What nuances of this skill haven't I fully developed yet?" This curiosity prevents the stagnation that comes from believing you've already mastered these capabilities. There are always subtler levels of awareness, more refined response options, and deeper levels of integration available. Master practitioners maintain beginner's mind even after decades of development. The ultimate maintenance strategy is connecting your response mastery to something larger than personal benefit. Whether that's serving your family, contributing to your profession, modeling consciousness for future generations, or participating in the evolution of human wisdom and compassion. When your practice serves purposes beyond personal comfort or success, it becomes much easier to maintain motivation and momentum over decades. This larger purpose transforms maintenance from a personal discipline into a form of service. You're not just keeping your skills sharp for your own benefit, you're maintaining your capacity to contribute positively to every system and relationship you're part of. This sense of service and contribution provides sustainable motivation that pure self-interest cannot match. Chapter 15. The Ultimate Transformation. Living from Unshakable Presence. As we reach the culmination of this comprehensive training, I want to paint a picture of what becomes possible when response mastery evolves into something even more profound. What ancient wisdom traditions call unshakable presence, and what modern psychology recognizes as post-conventional psychological development. This is where technique becomes being, where skill becomes identity, where response mastery becomes effortless wisdom. Unshakable presence isn't about never feeling difficult emotions or never being challenged by circumstances. It's about developing such deep inner stability that external situations no longer dictate your internal state. You become like a mountain that remains fundamentally unchanged whether the weather is stormy or calm, while still being responsive to environmental conditions. At this level of development, your emotional responses become like instruments in an orchestra that you can play with increasing subtlety and precision. You can access anger when strength and boundaries are needed, compassion when healing and understanding are required, excitement when inspiration and motivation are called for, and serenity when calm and stability are necessary. The full range of human emotion becomes available to you as conscious choices rather than unconscious reactions. This emotional mastery creates what researchers call psychological capital. an internal resource base that allows you to remain creative, generous, and effective even during periods of external challenge or uncertainty. When others around you are consumed by stress, overwhelm, or reactivity, you remain a source of clarity, wisdom, and solutions. This capacity makes you invaluable in every context, from intimate relationships to professional leadership. The ripple effects of this transformation extend far beyond your personal experience. When you operate from unshakable presence, you create what systems theorists call strange attractors. You become a gravitational center that draws people, opportunities, and resources toward higher levels of functioning. People feel calmer, more creative, and more capable in your presence because your nervous system helps regulate theirs. In your family relationships, this might manifest as becoming the person that others turn to during difficult times, not because you have all the answers, but because your presence itself is reassuring and your responses consistently demonstrate wisdom and love. Your children grow up with a template for emotional maturity because they've experienced it consistently in their daily environment. In your professional life, this might manifest as becoming a natural leader, regardless of your formal title or position. People seek your perspective during challenging decisions, include you in important opportunities, and trust you with increasing levels of responsibility because they've experienced your ability to remain centered and wise under pressure. The advanced understanding is that unshakable presence is both deeply personal and inherently relational. As you develop this capacity, you realize that your individual consciousness is inseparably connected to the consciousness of everyone around you. Your inner peace contributes to collective peace. Your emotional wisdom contributes to collective wisdom. Your conscious responses contribute to the evolution of human consciousness itself. This realization often leads to what developmental psychologists call self-transcendent motivation, the desire to contribute to something larger than personal success or happiness. You begin operating not just from your own needs and goals, but from a sense of responsibility to use your developed capacities in service of the greater good. This might manifest as mentoring others in emotional intelligence, creating environments that support psychological safety and human flourishing, or simply modeling the kind of consciousness you want to see more of in the world. The specific form matters less than the underlying shift from self-focused to service-focused motivation. One of the most profound aspects of this ultimate transformation is the development of what contemplative traditions call witnessing consciousness, the capacity to observe your own thoughts, emotions, and responses with loving detachment while remaining fully engaged with life. You develop a part of your awareness that can watch your human experience without being consumed by it. This witnessing capacity allows for unprecedented levels of choice and freedom. Even when you feel strong emotions, part of you remains connected to your essential stillness and wisdom. Even when you face significant challenges, part of you remains confident in your ability to navigate whatever arises with grace and skill. The paradox of advanced development is that, as your capacities become more sophisticated, your approach becomes more simple. You're not using complex techniques or strategies. You're simply being present with what is, while allowing your highly developed nervous system and consciousness to respond naturally and appropriately to each moment. This simplicity is the result of what learning theorists call unconscious competence. Skills that have been practiced so thoroughly that they operate automatically, without conscious attention. Just as a master craftsperson doesn't think about using their tools, you don't think about using response techniques because conscious response has become your natural way of being. The ultimate freedom comes from realizing that you don't need external circumstances to be any particular way for you to experience peace, joy, creativity, or fulfillment. These qualities become stable internal capacities rather than temporary states dependent on favorable conditions. You can be fundamentally happy whether you're facing success or setbacks, surrounded by supportive people or dealing with difficult personalities, experiencing health or managing illness. This doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent to outcomes. You remain fully engaged with improving circumstances, achieving goals, and contributing positively to your relationships and community. But your well-being and effectiveness are no longer hostage to external variables because they arise from your developed internal capacities rather than favorable conditions. The vision I want to leave you with is of a life lived from this unshakable presence. A life where you move through each day knowing that whatever arises, you have the awareness, skills, and inner resources to meet it with wisdom and grace. A life where your relationships are characterized by genuine intimacy and mutual growth because you're no longer defending against vulnerability or projecting your unresolved reactivity onto others. A life where your professional contributions are marked by innovative solutions and inspiring leadership because your clarity and creativity are no longer clouded by stress and reactivity. A life where you can be fully present with both joy and sorrow, success and failure, praise and criticism, because you've developed the capacity to meet all of life's experiences with equal presence and appropriate response. This transformation is not just possible. It's the natural result of consistent, dedicated practice of the principles and techniques we've explored throughout this training. Every pause you take, every conscious breath you breathe, every response you choose over reaction is a step toward this ultimate freedom and effectiveness. The journey begins with a single moment of awareness, continues through dedicated practice and integration, and culminates in a way of being that serves not only your own flourishing, but contributes to the flourishing of all life around you. The only question that remains is whether you're ready to claim this extraordinary potential that already exists within you, waiting to be awakened through your commitment to conscious response over unconscious reaction. This is your invitation to step fully into the most masterful, wise, and powerful version of yourself, not someday in the distant future, but beginning with your very next response to whatever challenge or opportunity life presents to you. The transformation starts now.